On today's show, a crossover edition of the podcast with myself and Tony East of Locked On Pacers, previewing the game on Tuesday. We'll have a full breakdown of what's to come, Trey and Halliburton, offense, defense, which should be a lot of points, a fun basketball game, and more, and all of that is on the way.
You are Locked On Hawks, your daily Atlanta Hawks podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Everybody, welcome. Crossover show, Locked On Pacers, Locked On Hawks, in-season tournament time, as good as it gets here on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm Tony East. I host Locked On Pacers. You've probably heard this other guy many a time as the host of Locked On Hawks, especially if you're listening on the Locked On Hawks feed. He's Brad Rowland. Brad, do you like the in-season tournament? Do you hate the in-season tournament? What do you think about what's about to happen today?
I am pro in-season tournament.
Yes.
At this point. I think we might be alone on this, you and I. I would say Hawks fans are more mixed in my experience so far, but I generally like it. And my overarching take, Tony, is that what's the harm? Like, the games have to happen anyway. Let's just have some fun. Yeah.
It's still a regular season game. What's the downside?
Agreed.
Actually, I'll step on my own toes. If guys keep slipping on these courts, yeah, I will say there is a downside, but they can easily fix that. Just play normal basketball courts.
Yeah, they don't have to use these. I know they're aesthetically pleasing or unpleasing, depending on which court you might look at. But yeah, they don't have to do that. And knock on wood, the Hawks have played 2 of these games and no one slipped. So I'm sort of insulated to that. But I agree that that'd be the only downside, would be some weirdness there.
Bright red tonight, correct, in Atlanta?
No, it's blue. Have you seen these?
Right.
So
I saw it. I
Hawks,
actually like that one.
They have these alternate, interesting courts that are to go along with their jerseys. They're not really an official color, but they're actually pretty, by in-season tournament standards, pretty soft. Like, they're not. It's not an oppressive color in the way that you would think. They do have some like gold in the middle. There's like a trophy in the middle. All that stuff. It's kind of a soft color. It's pretty easy for the eyes, in my opinion.
I actually saw it because didn't Princeton women and some other women's college team play on it before a Hawks game one day?
Sure. I'm sure they did. I don't
know. There was a college game on it, I think.
Yeah. And look, the Hawks played it. They lost on it, so maybe Hawks fans don't like that very much. They lost their one game on it so far. But I went in early that day, and I was like, it's definitely different. No question about that. But it's not like some of the oranges and reds we've seen that are like actually like hard to watch. It's not quite that bad. It's this very soft blue color.
Yeah, I watched a Bulls game and you can't see the ball. It's hard to follow it on the red. It's brutal. So that's good. I don't know if you know this, Brad. Lots at stake tonight because if the Pacers win, they win the group already through 3 games because they beat Philly and they beat Cleveland already in in-season tournament games. So they'd have 3 wins against the 3 teams that could all get to 3-1, and tiebreaker, the first one is head-to-head. Since the Pistons cannot get to 3-1, who the Pacers haven't played yet. Pacers can clinch the group as early as Tuesday, which is crazy. The Hawks can still also win the group, and the Pacers game is now very important because the Hawks have started okay throughout this. So a lot at stake, which I can't believe I'm saying that for a game on November 21st. But for real, there's actually a lot on the plate for these teams in this game. It's kind of pivotal in deciding the final standings.
It really is, and I have a bit on my podcast where I make fun of the notion of must-win games at the NBA regular season. It just doesn't ever happen. Like, I laugh every time a fan mentions that. I'm just like, no, nothing is must-win. But for the Hawks, if you care about the tournament, it actually is a must-win. The Hawks have to win this game, or they're probably dead. So, like, it's one of those things where it's still funny to me to say that about a game in November. But if the Hawks go to 1-2 with a loss to Philly and a loss to Indiana, I think they're like mathematically still alive, but they'd have to have it go very, very perfectly against them. So like it kind of is a must win for Atlanta. It's weird to say that.
I think if the Hawks lose, the only way they could make it to the playoff bracket is like a Pistons upset over the Cavs.
I looked it up. I'm not bored with this, but yeah, it takes several different results, including point differentials. They have to blow the Cavs out in their 4th game on the road. Not super likely to do that. Look, they have to win on Tuesday. If we're just very simply 99% of the way here, if the Hawks want to have a chance to advance, they have to win on Tuesday.
But I actually like that it's that simple, that like for fans, that it's like Pacers win group, Hawks win, still alive. Like, that is fun. That is something more to a normal regular season game. And it's not a negative because unless someone slips and gets around the court. So this is great. I'm a big fan. of the in-season tournament. You know what else I'm a fan of that I noticed I've done 1,000 times this season? Pacers just played the Magic. They played the Hornets. The Wizards don't really count this, but I feel like a lot of Pacers opponents, I end up saying something to this effect. 2 young ascending teams in the Eastern Conference facing off tonight. And I'm going to say it again for Pacers, Hawks, parallel paths. Hawks definitely ahead, obviously. They made the postseason several years in a row now. But where do you feel like the Hawks are? Are they trending upward in their trajectory? People were higher-ish on the Hawks coming into the season. Quinn Snyder's now running the show. It was fun to chat with him during the preseason. How have you felt about where Atlanta is and is headed right now?
Yeah, I think that it's kind of a weird spot because they are still fairly young, but like it's very different than Indiana or Orlando or a team that hasn't that's clearly trying to still build. The Hawks are not really in building mode anymore. Like they're not a title contender either, so they're in this weird place where they do have a pretty young roster. Their best players for the most part are pretty young, but they're not necessarily like on the straight trajectory up either, if that makes sense. And they're 6-6 right now. There's been some angst locally about that start. I think if you look a step deeper, they look okay. They've played a difficult schedule so far this season. Their point differential is positive. I'm in a place where I think that it's good to be like cautiously optimistic about the Hawks, both short term and long term. They put a lot of eggs in the Quinn Snyder basket, as you referenced before. Like he was their big change in the offseason. They traded John Collins for nothing. Other than that, like they basically put it all on development internally of players and Quinn Snyder. And if you look again, like a half step closer, their shot profile has improved, like stuff that coaches can kind of dictate. They've done pretty well so far through 12 games. So they're on the way up still, I think, but it's not an arrow pointing directly up like some of these young teams where it's like, okay, it's all sunshine and rainbows. We're on the way up. The Hawks have expectations, both internal and external locally. And they haven't been great so far, but they expect to be in the playoffs. And that's a different sort of baseline than a lot of these young teams.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but I think the Pacers and Hawks have something in common. That's that their local fan base would feel better if they had just beaten the Hornets.
The Hawks, that Hawks game was the season opener, and there was a little bit of grace, I think, because it was the season opener and it was on the road and I was there. It was a weird game, but yeah, that's the one. All respect to the Hornets, the one bad team the Hawks have lost to so far is the Hornets, but it was the opener. It was a weird thing. But other than that, like no one wants to hear this. In fact, I did a show yesterday, and no one wants to listen to this, and I got feedback about this. But the Hawks don't have any other bad losses. That's their only bad loss, and it was the first game of the season. So it's like, it's okay.
No, Knicks twice, right? Heat, and I forget your other loss. I was looking.
Knicks twice, Heat at OKC, and then Philly at home. It's like, okay, none of those are. Granted, the Heat didn't have Jimmy, so that made it a little bit worse. But it's the Heat. The Heat have voodoo power. Right. We all know this. So,
and beating the Pels, beating the Timberwolves, which is very impressive this season.
Milwaukee too. Yeah, they have some good wins. Yeah, they have. It's been fine so far. I would say it's been like a C+ start, B-. It's not been great. It's been okay.
3 of the Pacers' 5 losses are Orlando, Chicago, and Charlotte, but they've also beaten Milwaukee, Cleveland twice, and Philly. So they're kind of in the same boat where it's like everyone's kind of like, how could you not win these winnable ones, but take down these Titans? Like it's hard to kind of gauge where a team is at in that situation.
Yeah, Indiana's, as I'm sure you cover every single day on this podcast, your team every day, of course. Very volatile, it seems like. I mean, last night I watched the first half, which was not the half. The game on Sunday was not the half to watch if you're a Pacers fan. The first half, they were better than the second half. It seems like I saw the final score, but the first half was like, what are we doing here, Indiana? What's going on? But maybe it's just some variance.
It felt very weird explaining. Like I had to lead my show with that. Like if you didn't watch this game and you're here to hear about what happened and you saw that they lost by 12, please ignore that. They were awful.
It was worse. Yes,
they were terrible. Yeah, they are volatile, sort of. I think it's because so much of their high level success is on one player, and he is awesome and can do it. Like Philly was a top 5 defense when they played them. Now they're 12th because the Pacers tore them up. The Magic and Celtics, the 2 best defenses in the league, are the only 2 teams that really slowed Tyrese Haliburton down to the point that they looked miserable in those games. They lost by 50 in Boston, right? So that's, if you're the Pacers, the concern of where the volatility is coming from is if teams have found a way to slow down Haliburton, the team has been poor. But the volatility is like if they don't figure it out or Tyrese's adjustment is faster than the other team's adjustment to him, you're screwed because he's going to have 25 plus points and 12 plus assists, and their offense is going to be 120 points per 100 possessions at least with him out there. So as long as he's faster or thinking quicker than the other team, they're going to be really tough to beat, and they have been.
Yeah, it seems like just kind of tease a little bit ahead. This feels like a game that could be quite electric and high scoring. Not a lot of defense being played by these teams so far this year. Two very good offenses that play fast. There's might be some popcorn to be shared,
and some point guards who are very highlight filled in a good way, in a productive way. Let's talk about that in just a second, Brad. I think before we do that, we got to talk to everybody about the wonderful people over at FanDuel. The NFL is cruising. The Colts had the week off. I don't think the Falcons had the week off. I should know that, but I don't. And you can score early this NFL season over on FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Right now, new customers on FanDuel get $150. That's a lot. In bonus bets with any winning $5 moneyline bet. If your team wins that $5 moneyline bet, $150. How about that? If you've been thinking about joining FanDuel, there's no better time to get in on the action than right now. NFL's cruising, about halfway done. NBA's going. NHL is rolling. You can get in on all your faves there at FanDuel. And their app is super easy to use. They've got a wide range of betting options. They've got your over-unders. They've got your spreads. They've got your player props. Whatever your favorites are, FanDuel's got them. So visit FanDuel.com/lockedon. Kick off the NFL season. Get in on the NBA action over at FanDuel, an official partner of the NFL. Back here, crossing it over. Locked on Pacers, Locked on Cavs. Thanks for making either of our shows your first listen today and every single day for your second listen. We talked about them, and I want more people to hear about the Timberwolves. So Ben Bakeen, the best team in the league right now. Minnesota Timberwolves. That's maybe a stretch. The best team in the West right now, the Minnesota Timberwolves. Hear more about them on Locked on Wolves here on this crossover show. Fitting. Let's talk about two guards who can cross over and beat their defenders and make defenses react and are really good. Trae Young, Tyrese Halliburton. Brad, do you agree? It feels like Trae Young always has pretty good games against the Pacers.
Yeah, that feels right to me. I haven't admittedly done a deep dive on that particular stat set against Indiana, but it feels like it's a friendly matchup to a lot of opposing guards, all due respect to Indiana right now. And look, Trae Young can kind of use it. I mean, I said this on my show earlier. It feels like Trae Young's local approval rating is the lowest it's ever been, which might seem interesting from the outside, and it kind of is to me too. He had a very bad playoff series a couple years ago that people kind of want to skate on for the most part. But yeah, granted, he's not shooting the ball well. I mean, you know how that goes, Tony. If you don't make shots, if you have bad percentages, it's easy for plans to be like, hey, that guy not playing well because he's not making shots. And Trae's been missing shots. He has career worst efficiency this year. So I think maybe he's looking forward to playing against Indiana, especially after 3 days. The Hawks have 3 days off before this game. So some practice time, some tweaks. They don't have to travel at all. It's a pretty friendly spot for the offense. And I think that, Trae, and also something about Trae that I know is true. He likes to get up for some big opponents, especially opponents at his position. I'm sure he has seen some of the buzz that Tyrese Halliburton has received in the last couple of weeks. And even if you won't admit that, Trae likes to get up for that kind of thing too. So yeah, I think that he will probably be licking his shots a little bit, mostly because of the defense, to be honest, about the Pacers, but also because he just kind of needs a game that he makes shots and has a big game.
Okay, per game in his career, Trae Young against the Pacers, 26.3. That is his 8th highest of any opponent. 43% from deep in his career against the Pacers. He had that 50-pointer in Indy, I remember.
I remember that one.
Yeah. So maybe I'm misguided by one 50-pointer, but 50 is a lot, and it's kind of wild to see it in person every single time it happens, even though I'm sure you've seen many a Trae Young 50-point game. Yeah, his splits are down this year. I do, just from a career arc perspective, right? Great scorer, shooter from deep, really good passer, similar skill set to what makes Halliburton so great on offense. What has kind of helped? I mean, the shot has escaped him this year, as you said, but what has kind of helped Trae Young evolve past that skill set? Like, what is the next level for him? And can Halliburton replicate those skills? Is there a different path that makes sense? Obviously, there's this whole defensive side of the ball that they both struggle on, but what has kind of guided Trae Young forward from that base in his career?
Yeah, it's interesting because they're both much different sizes, of course, but they do kind of play similarly in a lot of ways. Trae, I think it can hamper him that he's so small, but also he's figured it out as well as anybody basically ever has at that size. Like, he's able to get to the line despite being 6'1" on a good day. Like, that's the area that he, I think, differentiates himself against a lot of guards, no matter how big or small they are, is that he is so good. And look, it gets picked on by a lot of people too about how he foul baits. And look, he does foul bait, but he does it in a very smart way. And when you're not making shots, it's something that can lift your efficiency up to respectability when you get to the line 10, 11, 12 times a game, which has happened so far this year. The Hawks would be in trouble without Trey getting to the line as much as he does. So that's an area I would circle. Like that, Tyrese is not like he's even skinnier than Trey. Like it won't always be easy, but I think he can. That's an area to maybe low hanging fruit. And the passing. I mean, this is the first time actually in Trey's career under Quinn Snyder that he's played in a kind of a different offense, which I'm attributing some of the slow start to. They're playing a little bit more. I don't want to say egalitarian, but they're able to play from different angles with this current scheme. It's not just Trey running high pick and roll every single time down the floor, which happened for the first several years of his career. That's probably a little bit of an overstatement, but that was a lot of what the Hawks did for a long time. And I think that he is the kind of guy who has to adjust to that a little bit more and play off the ball better. Tyrese hasn't really had that problem. He did that as even in college. I know you know that, but he was not always the primary guy, even in college. Right. Trey's always been the primary guy at every level he's ever played at. So that tweak has been that's more of a Trey tweak. But both these guys, for me anyway, my favorite thing with Trey has always been his passing. It's the same with Tyrese. I love that about both these guys. They're, for my money, the two best guard passers in the entire league. You could throw Jokic in there, of course. Other guys may have other cases, but they are two of the top 5 passers in the league.
Agreed.
So it's like the similarities are pretty obvious, but they do have kind of divergent paths to get here. Now they've kind of come to the same spot, and it's like, all right, what's the next thing? Trey has the advantage too of being able to have proven it more in the playoff stage. He had that one big playoff run where he was the best player on a conference finals team. Obviously, Halliburton has not had a chance to do that yet. So that honestly, I shudder to think what the perception of Trae Young would be nationally if he didn't have that run, because he already gets kind of piled on sometimes. And you can still say, hey, he was the best player on a conference finalist team. If he hadn't had that, it might get dicey. But anyway, that's a long answer. But I feel like they're very similar players in a lot of ways.
The biggest one you said to me was the free throws. So this year, Halliburton being in a good way. This word always has a negative connotation, but in a good way, Halliburton being a little more selfish, hunting for his own shot because it's an efficient play when Tyrese Halliburton tries to score. And now he has upped his free throw attempts per game to 4.3. That is lower than Trae Young has had ever. Rookie Trae Young was over 5, right? So like that is a huge separator between them and their efficiency. Halliburton makes up for it by being a much more consistent shooter. He's been over 40% every year. But that is like, to me, one of the marks of a star is they can get to the line all the time. They live there. That helps them in the half court. They can bail their team out on inefficient nights. And Halliburton is such a good scorer that it hasn't mattered. But like at some point, I think him upping his free throw rate, maybe significantly, is going to be a big part of his star turn. And Trey has that. The other important difference you said is their height difference, right? Yeah. That's why Trey gets picked on to the extent he does. Halliburton does too, defensively. But yeah, you want to say something? Sorry, I can tell.
I was going to say, I think I'm glad you kind of led with Hallie not being the best defender right now. I think because he is not 6'1", and dating back to college, even I think his rep is probably better than his actual defense has been so far. I think there are most people. I think it's maybe turning a little bit towards people figuring it out. He's not a great defender right now, but when he came in the league, it was like, oh, this guy's going to be a game changer defensively, and that is not materialized. And I've always liked him, but that part of the floor has not really happened.
Yeah, he reads the game really well.
He does.
Like he can get those steals in the passing lanes and like be a good team defender, but on the ball, like you see teams hunt him late in some games for a reason, right? Trey's had this problem too.
And Trey's improved, by the way. Like he's bad. Don't get me wrong. He's bad. But I think that he has gone from being what many describe as the worst defender in the league. That was like just casually thrown out all the time. Oh, he's the worst defender in the league. He's not the worst defender in the league anymore. Like maybe he's a 20th percentile defender instead of a 5th percentile defender. But that gap does matter. He's gotten better. He's gotten feistier. I think he figured out what he can and can't do. He's got good hands. Something that Howie does too. He's got great hands. That can be a small thing. Just digs and getting deflections and like just being an active part of the defense.
I am gonna bet on Trae Young's. I don't bet on anything, but like verbally bet on Trae Young's season futures being really good because of something. This is such a blast from the past, but I remember Mike Conley when he was with the Jazz and Quinn Snyder was the head coach talking about how you need a PhD to run Quinn Snyder's offense because it's kind of complicated. And you'd always see it with the Jazz. They would start making this up 11-9, 12-8, and then they'd have this December, January schedule. Like this team's unbelievable. They're the best offensive league, because everybody would kind of figure it out and it would all click. And like, if someone important gets hurt, maybe it can't happen. Or if there's a big trade, maybe this never clicks. But like, it happened with Utah a lot on those Mitchell, Conley, Gobert teams. And I wonder if when Trae gets it all through with what Snyder's doing this year, and the Hawks as a team do as well, they have, Jalen Johnson looks great, for example, like all these different pieces playing well, if they're just going to have this stretch in January, like, oh my God, the Hawks look great. And then Trae's stats are going to just look unbelievable in a stretch like that.
No, it's a great point. I'm jealous of that point that you made. I'm going to steal it and use it on my show.
Yes,
in the future.
I'll find a quote for you.
But yeah, no, it's a good point. And much was made about Quinn taking over last year midseason, but he came out in the preseason was like, by the way, we put in nothing last year. Essentially, he was. So it was more about like building relationships. And Quinn was like, no, this is actually my first season when it comes to like putting my scheme in. And if you want to frame it positively, the Hawks have a top 5 offense right now in the league with Trae shooting this badly and without any of the PhD stuff that you just mentioned. So like, if you want to kind of pick the arrow up on the offense, I would probably lean that direction too. Like, there's a lot of good signs, especially when you factor in that Trae is not going to do this. Like, he's going to be better than this for the rest of the season.
I found the exact quote from Mike Conley, so you can cite as much as you want. Emmanuel Mudiay is involved somehow, so that was upset of the century.
All right.
But this is after Conley got traded to the Jazz. He said, me and Emmanuel joked the first day of training camp, I think you need a PhD to play here. They didn't tell us that when we came. So.
I'm sold. I will attribute that to you, not even just Quinn Snyder. It was like, actually Tony East told me on a pod. No, it was that's a great nugget though. Seriously, and if you watch the Hawks, especially compared to, and you're very familiar with this, Nate McMillan was the previous coach.
Yeah.
And Nate does not have the same kind of PhD level offense. It's very much a mismatch hunting, like more old school approach. And Quinn is just the complete opposite of that.
Nate McMillan is going to take his time and pass up good shots for great shots, because sometimes the great shot's not there. So you have to take a mid-range shot.
All those things.
And it's great. He's a great coach the first year he's there, putting in some defensive stuff. And then, it
levels off.
It levels off. There is a peak to the Nate McMillan experience. One more segment here, talking Pacers, Cavs. Oh, no, that's not the team they play. Pacers, Hawks. I don't know why I said Cavs. I had the Cavs schedule in a search bar because I was looking at all the in-season tournament schedules. That's why I said Cavs. Before we finish up today, we're going to talk to you guys about the great people at PrizePicks. It's daily fantasy sports made easy, and it's so simple. You pick more than or less than on 2 to 6 player stat projections. Watch the winnings roll in. For example, I'm not looking this up if this is the exact line, but Trae Young, more or less, than 7.5 assists. You pick that, that's how you play. And they have some new stuff on PrizePicks. For example, combo projections across sports in their specials league. For example, LeBron James plus Travis Kelce at a 10.5 combo of 3-pointers made plus receptions. How about that? Or you can use their reboot policy. How about that? If one of your players gets injured, boom, rebooted. How about that? One of the only daily fantasy sports platforms is an injury insurance policy. PrizePicks, an absolute blast. It's super simple. You can make your picks in a minute or less. Quick withdrawals, easy gameplay, enormous selection of players and stat types. Check it out at prizepicks.com and go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnNBA. Use the code LockedOnNBA when you do so for a first deposit match up to $100. Heck yeah, prizepicks.com/LockedOnNBA. Use that code LockedOnNBA for $100 first deposit match at PrizePicks. Daily fantasy sports made easy. Back here talking Pacers and Hawks on Locked On Pacers and Locked On Hawks. Brad, I need you now to give me a nugget about the Pacers that I can use for the rest of the season and attribute to you.
I'm gonna fail on that almost certainly here on the podcast. I think your list of Pacers nuggets is going to be much longer and more fruitful than mine. So I didn't carry my own weight on this podcast.
I don't know why I remember that Conley quote so much.
Hey, that whatever works, man. There are things in my head that just pop up sometimes. I'm like, why am I thinking about that right now? I don't know what's going on. Like you, we cover other teams on occasion, cover the whole league on occasion, and it's like stuff it just cooks in there every once in a while.
It never. We were talking in the locker room before the Pacers last game, me and another reporter for the team, about a random NFL game between the Steelers and Dolphins that was so muddy. It was 3-0 was the final score, and no one could get any yards. And we both remembered the game vividly. It was in 2008. It's like, how does this stuff just never get out of your brain?
Sports.
Do you think the game total for points reaches 260? That is, I think, going to be this game.
I would probably. I can't wait to see what the number is according to our friends at FanDuel. It's going to be very high. Might be one of the highest of the season. That seems too high, but I wouldn't rule it out.
But is it?
I wouldn't rule it out. Especially because the Hawks want to play fast this year. unlike in Indiana, I think it's been better anecdotally from what I have seen at dictating tempo. Like they're just like they're really, really dictating in the way that the Hawks have been dragged down by some teams to playing slower on some nights. That won't be a problem in this game because Indiana wants to play even faster than Atlanta does. So I think the Hawks are comfortable playing fast, and Indiana obviously is. So yeah, if shots fall and if threes fall in particular on both sides, this could be in the 130s, like on both sides. That would not surprise me at all, which would be wild, but I could certainly see it happening if both teams just shoot an adequate number of threes and make them. Basically, it's like, and you know how that is. A lot of NBA games, the point totals and the game flow dictates on 3-point shooting, and if the both teams make shots, it could be 142 to 139, and I wouldn't be shocked. I really wouldn't be.
The Pacers just played the Magic, right? We talked about that a second ago. The Magic were fresh off of 2 games against the Bulls where the final score was like 99-95 in both of them. And then the Magic got over 130, and the Pacers were in the 120s. Like Pacers Magic was almost at 260. Like it's crazy how many of their games get.
And also to add to that, like I know that pace is not always the best possible indicator on both ends of the floor, but this is number 1 versus number 3 in pace. Indiana's number 1, Atlanta's number 3. Plus these quality offenses, they're not just playing fast and playing defense. Like some teams actually play fast, they don't score. These teams are both offense first teams with offense first guards who run. Like that's kind of a simple formula for a lot of points.
Yeah, and the Pacers outside of that Orlando game, it's crazy that this game just happened because I would have had a lot of better points if it didn't. Have basically been able to set their speed in every game they played except for in Boston. But Haliburton didn't play that game, so it's like, duh, of course they're not going to be able to.
Yeah.
So because of him, like they whip it in fast from out of bounds and they get into their action like 4 seconds into the shot clock, and all these teams are trying to adjust by pressing and getting up in him like really early in the shot clock, and that's all great. But like I said earlier, if he adjusts before you do, that might not work for a whole game. So it's going to be interesting to see how that bears out because there's a chance this game is just like 12-second possession, open 3, 12-second possession, open 3, 12-second possession, shot in the lane. And I don't know if that necessarily favors either team. So it could just come down to better shooting or one role player stepping up or a couple big defensive moments. And that'll be telling in this game.
Yeah, I agree. Look, somebody has to get stops eventually. We've kind of joked around it. Neither one of these teams is playing great defense right now. No. I think the Hawks probably have better personnel defensively than Indiana does. So maybe that's a differentiator in this spot. One area that the Hawks have struggled in this recent downturn where they've lost 4 of the last 6 is defensive rebounding, but that's not really an area that I think Indiana is going to like bludgeon them on the offensive glass. Like they're capable of being okay there, but the Hawks have really struggled there against like the likes of New York, who's number 1 in the league, and Philly. And that size there's not really a size differential in the way that there has been in some of these matchups. So man, it's like these teams are kind of mirrors of each other. I just kind of trust the Hawks defense more than Indiana's. So maybe that's it. And also this game crucially is in Atlanta. I think that at tip-off, unless there's a surprising injury on one side, the Hawks will be favored at FanDuel. I would expect, despite the fact that Indiana is 2-0 in the group. The game's in Atlanta, and I think the market probably has these teams relatively similar at this point. Maybe a slight lean to Atlanta still after this start. So, I mean, it's like if you're the Hawks, you got to win at home too. The Hawks have been bad at home this year. I think they're 2-4 at this point at home. That's not what you want to do. You got to win home games if you want to get where you want to go. Every single coach, whether they're a robot or not, will tell you they have to win home games. So it's like maybe that's kind of the difference in this game is that Atlanta's playing at home and Indiana's not.
Brad, I'm going to hit you with some lazy analysis, so get ready. The Pacers' good defensive players, or most of them, Miles Turner's obviously excellent down low, are perimeter guys who are like 6'5"-ish, right? Bruce Brown, Aaron Nesmith, Andrew Nembhard if he plays. So that is actually mostly good against the Hawks, who aren't a huge team. But there's a guy on Atlanta who I said his name for a second earlier, and we haven't talked about it at all, who's initiating, who looks faster, who's making quicker decisions, and did not play, I believe, or kind of stunk, I can't remember, in the preseason against the Pacers, and that's Jalen Johnson. And if he plays at his high level tonight, I think that's going to be significant because, like, a big part of you watch the first half, the Pacers struggle against the Magic is like, Bruce Brown's their best option on Franz Wagner. That's like a 6-inch difference, right? Like it's their best option. I'm not blaming the Pacers for choosing that. Yeah. It's just you're going to give up points there. It's just going to happen. So that is where I think the Hawks can find some advantage. Obi Toppin will be on Jalen Johnson at some points, but like at some point, Aaron Nesmith's going to come in if he's healthy. He hurt his shoulder in the last game. So that is the thing where I'm like, okay, the Hawks have this size advantage at one position, not a bunch like Orlando did, but at one position that could swing the game significantly in their favor if he plays well.
Yeah, Jalen's been an X factor for the Hawks all year long. Like he's kind of having a second-year breakout in year 3, if that makes sense. Like he's in year 3 right now, but his rookie season he basically didn't play at all. And last year he kind of had a pseudo rookie season, and now he's playing a lot. And actually, I think he's third on the team in minutes right now. So yeah, his breakout is happening. I think his efficiency is going to come down a little bit because it's just been not his fault. He's just been ridiculous. It's like 45% from three, and he's going to cool off a little bit at some point. But I agree, like he's a X factor for them every night, and he did play. I looked it up briefly while you were talking, and he did play in that Indiana game in preseason. Okay. He wasn't very good in that game. I think he was 2 of 8. So we'll see how that goes. But yeah, I always circle him, but I especially in this matchup circle him. And the other guys, not really Trey. I would circle DeJounte Murray because I think DeJounte Murray is going to get the Tyrese assignment for a large portion of this game. And DeJounte's defense has come and gone, let's say, in the last year and a half since he got to Atlanta. I think he'll be up for the game, I'm sure. But if they this is very simple. Speaking of lazy analysis, if they let Halliburton go off, they're going to probably be in some trouble. If they can keep Halliburton in some reasonable range against this team, because we talked about it before, Indiana is as reliant on Halliburton as any team is on any player. Or
put us on First Take with these takes, man.
You know what I mean, though? Like,
yes,
it's not that Indiana doesn't have other options, but like this is a 1-star team right now, and if you can keep him somewhat contained, there's a path to bottling up, not necessarily stopping Indiana, because this is a really good offense especially when he plays. But yeah, just not letting him go crazy would be a key step, and I think Murray's going to be assignment number 1 on that. Yeah,
part of the Pacers' improvement from last year is their bench has been ridiculously good this year.
Yeah,
so they have survived the minutes without him in ways that they didn't last year. But yes, he is super significant, and that cross match in general is going to matter, right? Because Bruce Brown's probably going to be on Trey, I would imagine. So if he can defend well-ish, that would be huge, and he can kind of initiate. You know, he had a good game against Orlando. He was the only starter who played even a modicum of good basketball on Sunday. If he can initiate well with Trey, presumably on him, although maybe they would hide Trae Young somewhere else. I don't know where. I think he'd be an X factor on the Pacers side as a guy who could swing that, because those cross matches are going to dictate a lot of the responses to the game, who's playing well, how that all works will be extremely significant. Anything else on this game? Are you hype for NBA Cup action?
I am. It'll be interesting. I'll be in the building for it on Tuesday.
There you go.
The urgency level is one that we just haven't seen in a November game in my recent memory. So I actually want to see how the Hawks respond in general to like having a game that I think they could reasonably say before the game they kind of have to win. Like they have to win this game. So it's a new phenomenon. I think they care. Speaking to people behind the scenes, I think the Hawks do care about the tournament. Are they living and dying by it in the way they would the playoffs? No, nobody's doing that yet, and especially in the group stage. But they do care. So maybe like it's a 10% uptick in attention level. And again, they had 3 days off. And usually when teams have 3 days off, they can play faster. They got a little bit more pep in their step. Your legs are there, and they're at home. Like I think if the Hawks don't start hot in this game, I would be a little worried. But yeah, it should be one that should be close, should be entertaining, and I'm looking forward to it.
Brad, I don't know if your desk is wooden, but the Pacers had 4 days off before they played the Magic, and they were very rusty.
Well, yeah, okay, maybe.
Please knock on wood if you can.
Maybe that 4th day is the X factor there. No, I'm kidding. But yeah, okay, maybe knock on wood, I guess. But no, sir, I'm looking forward to a fun game. I can't imagine this game not being fun, honestly, on some level. So maybe I'm jinxing it, but I'm looking forward to a fun basketball game.
Rick Carlisle said it. They talked to the team about the standings. Everybody knows what's at stake. It's going to be fun. If you want more on this, Locked On Hawks has plenty more for Pacers people, and Locked On Pacers has plenty more for Hawks people. Should be a fun one. I'm on Twitter at Tony R. East. Brad's there at BT Rowland. You can find his work on his Patreon and at Locked On Hawks. I cover the Pacers for Forbes, SI, and here on the Locked On Pacers podcast. Thank y'all for listening. We'll see you soon.